everyone, this edition of the Other 99, we're going to take a look at the new set Avacyn Restored. But instead of hearing my voice ramble as usual, I have a guest with me.
Hey guys, I'm Brionne. You might know me from my monthly article on Commander Cast. I am also Karsten's partner in production in that I do most of the writing for the videos.
We both have different takes on a lot of the cards, and so hopefully seeing both of our perspectives will be nice. This set review will be different than most set reviews you may see, as we're going to be looking at potential Commander cards. Additionally, we have separated the cards into a few categories: the obvious new additions, potential additions, niche additions, and the potential generals. Also, if you see a card with the budget approved label, that means that the card will probably be super cheap. Obvious new additions include cards that, due to previous experience with similar cards, can be easily assumed to be good in Commander. Brionne, why don't you start us off?
Alright, our first card in the obvious new additions is Angel of Jubilation, which as a player who loves mono white, I saw Angel of Jubilation and kind of freaked out. Obviously you're only going to be playing it in mono white decks because it does cost triple white, but I think it's great. You shut down all the other cards that require paying life or sacrificing, and that's something that white doesn't have to do, so it's not even going to affect you.
Definitely going to be a card you can pretty much stuff in any white deck. Next we have Defy Death. Sorcery in white that brings stuff back to the battlefield is always going to be good. It's one more than Breath of Life, but in EDH, Creature Recursion is always going to be good.
The only thing I don't like about it is that Miraculous Recovery also costs 5, is an instant, and is only 1 white, but when you look at the fact that Miraculous Recovery is from Visions, this is going to be a lot easier for newer players to get a hold of. The next card is Terminus. I kind of freaked out when I saw it because it's Hallowed Burial for 1 more, but it has a Miracle for 1 white. I'm really excited at the idea of having Hallowed Burial number 2 because I think tucking everyone's creatures to keep them from recurring them is something that's so good that I'm trying to find room for it in my mono white deck.
If Miracle's any good, this card is going to be bonkers.
Even without it, it's still 1 more than Hallowed Burial.
Yeah. Next we have Devastation Tide. It's another Keterek Leviathan style card, but this card is going to be played in all kinds of blue decks, especially if Miracle's any good.
The only thing I don't like about it is that unlike something like Evacuation that bounces all of your creatures, it bounces everything, which means it also hits your mana rocks, something that if you're playing blue or a deck that needs this style of sweeper is probably going to be playing. Next card that we're going to talk about is Tamiyo the Moon's Sage. I like her because I think she's kind of similar in playstyle to a Johnny Vengeance, but I feel like in EDH, her abilities are a little more relevant than a Johnny Vengeance because her +1 taps it down, so you don't have to wait for it to become tapped. And I feel like anytime she hits the field and you do her -2, even if one of your opponents only has 2 or 3 creatures, at the very worst, you're going to be paying 5 mana to draw anywhere from 3 to 5 cards on average.
And the ultimate is just so awesome. It's almost irresistible. And next, we have Temporal Mastery. It's another Time Warp variant. The fact that it can be a Time Walk, and Sensei's Divine Top, get to the top of your library, Time Walk, that's pretty awesome.
Barter and Blood is a reprint, and I don't see it played a lot, but when I do, I think it's great. It's really cheap, efficient removal, and let's face it, with Damnation being $25, it's kind of unrealistic for a lot of players to try to find one, so I feel like if you're going to need some budget removal, or if you play a deck that needs high volumes of spot removal, then I feel like it's pretty good, because there's the obvious sacking, gets around indestructibility and stuff like that.
Next, we have Reforge the Soul. Wheel of Fortune is one of the best red cards in Commander, so this is going to see play.
Next up is Craterhoof Behemoth. I don't like it as much as the other pump effects you have access to in mono green, like say Kamal Fist of Krosa, but it is a 5/5 with haste, at least. You're going to have more creatures than that. And it still makes for good alpha strikes, and so I feel like why not have more overruns?
And yay, we have another card that works great with Avenger of Zendikar. Somberworld Sage. A pretty insane amount of acceleration. Playing turn 7 creatures on turn 4 seems pretty good to me.
Well, I think it's really good for decks that have really expensive generals, too. Otherworld Atlas. I like it because it's very similar to Temple Bell, and so it's also one of those Howling Mine, Font of Mythos cards that there are a lot of decks that want those cards. Group hug decks that just need to draw a lot of cards and don't mind other people drawing cards. And I also feel like if you put enough counters on it, there's going to come a point where tapping it is going to be more of a burden for other players because they're not just drawing 1 card. That's helpful, but if you're drawing 5 or 6 extra cards once a turn, then that's not very good. So I feel like the decks that need Temple Bell number 2 or 3, that it's going to be great.
Alchemist's Refuge. The green is super relevant, obviously. It's going to be good with anything big, fat, and green. And plus, flashing in blue sorceries, like a lot of people are thinking green stuff, but the blue sorceries, that's the stuff that you're going to be playing at instant speed with blue is also very relevant.
Well, and what I'm thinking is that we kind of have a precedent for this card in Winding Canyons, which, granted, you're having to pay a blue and a green instead of colorless, but Winding Canyons is great, so I can see Alchemist's Refuge being just as good, if not better, in decks that can play it. Next up is Slayer's Stronghold, and I saw this card and I immediately thought of Sunhome Fortress of the Legion, which obviously this land is not as powerful as that because double strike, right? But at the same time, it costs 2 less to activate, so I still feel like in the decks that are going to play Sunhome, I feel like if you are trying to put damage on the board, especially with your general, that it's going to be pretty handy.